And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cyrus Webb Presents here on Amazon Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. Excited to welcome back a guest that's been with us quite a bit as we've been going through a relationship series, something very different for me here on Amazon Live. But we're excited to welcome back relationship expert and author Chris A. Matthews. You got to know him through the different books and workbooks he's been able to write, but also the work he's been able to do as a therapist as well. Let me go ahead and highlight the book I have right here, Finding Your Relationship Fix. We've been talking a good bit about this book and go ahead and get it so you guys can get less of the glare there. On the Amazon Live side, I'm going to go ahead and highlight it over there for you guys. It's $19.99 for you today. Also, he has an ebook too that we've talked about. It is $2.99. We talked about that in our very first episode here. There's some workbooks as well. We're going to go through those. But I do want to say as a quick programming note for those tuning in on the Amazon Live side, if you guys are new to us here, you are browsing for books, you're like, okay, who are these guys up on our screen? You guys make sure you give us a follow. We have programming here on Amazon Live 7 days a week. You'll notice the follow button is either in this corner or down below. Also beneath us, you'll notice the row of books. That's our carousel for our guest for today. So you'll notice all the books and workbooks by Chris are there in the carousel. Feel free to be able to click on those. It won't interrupt our stream. Make sure you guys go through those for sure. If you guys have any questions on the Amazon Live side, or you're tuning in on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on YouTube, you have a question, feel free to be able to drop that in the comments. We'll be glad to be able to get that addressed for you. But Chris, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
So, man, this has been quite a series. I've gotten a lot out of this myself, and it goes back to something that I said in the very first time when I was introduced to you, and I actually read the books. I'm like, you know what? I get that these are for those who are in intimate relationships, but the principles I think are so important for all of us. And I think if I can say for myself, Chris, as I've gone throughout this series with you, and I'll ask you what it's been like for you, but three of the big takeaways from me for our audience out there. One of them is the importance of communication. I think that is one of the big things that definitely has come through in these conversations I've had with Chris, that the reason why so many relationships break down is because of a lack of communication or not clear communication. And it definitely is the case with intimate partners for sure. The second thing, though, Chris, that I love that you highlight that I've never really talked a lot about is that realize you're not a mind reader. You don't know what people are thinking. You don't know how to react to what you think they're going to do. You need to actually get it from them, be able to ask the questions, have those conversations, which goes back to the communication aspect, and stop trying to react to things that are not going on just because you perceive that a person is going to respond a certain way. The third thing, though, Chris, that I really appreciate about this series is something, again, all of us have a problem with, I think men and women, is that admit when you've messed up. Because only then can you then fix it, right? That's the only time that it works in trying to get a resolution is if someone admits that they have made a misstep, they've made a misjudgment, done something to hurt someone. And I think those are the big things. So those are the big three things for me, Chris. If you've kind of gone throughout the series here on Amazon Live, what are some of the takeaways that you kind of have taken from our conversation?
So I want to start by saying those big three that you mentioned are the cornerstone for a lot of the work that I do, because communication, first and foremost, is the blood of the relationship. And I use that example because blood is using your body to transfer oxygen, nutrients, etc. So if you can't translate messages back and forth in your relationship, then essentially it's not going to be sustainable. Then when you talk about the mind reading, I think that's been a very important component of the work you and I are doing as we do these shows in this series, because most couples need that validation to know it's okay not to know. I think sometimes we feel like our partner is supposed to know what we're thinking because we're so comfortable and we've been with them, or we've established a history, or we have those feelings of love and connection. But that doesn't mean that they're going to constantly be willing or able to read your mind. And then last but not least, when you talked about the opportunity for partners to, I'm trying to remember, you said mind reading, communication and mind reading, and then the last one was
admitting when they've made a mistake or have been wrong.
Yeah, so that's important too, because when you think about forgiveness is a process. We think I'm sorry is the forgiveness. Understanding how you hurt your partner or what you did wrong, that's the actual forgiveness piece. And I feel like this entire platform is giving people an opportunity to even have the conversations about relationships, because without being prompt, people usually don't go down this path. And I hear a lot of couples that tell me in therapy, I don't talk about my relationship because I don't want to create a fight. I don't talk about my relationship because I don't want to be vulnerable. I feel like if I give my partner the upper hand, then I'm not superior or I'm losing. So it's a lot of win-lose mentality or weak and strong versus weak mentality. But this dialogue with you and I has been eye-opening, because it's allowing people to know it's okay to talk about relationships. It's okay not to have it figured out. This is a journey. It is not a destination.
Yeah. So we're going to break down some of the things we have talked about in this series, Chris, from your book, Finding Your Relationship Fix. I'm going to go ahead and get it back up there, but also through your workbook. So let's begin, though, with relationship counseling tools. That is your business. Talk to us about how relationship counseling tools came about, Chris. Why did you see a need to create this platform?
So Relationship Counseling Group is the therapeutic practice that I operate out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I realized that if you're not licensed in a certain state, you can't conduct therapeutic practices. So Relationship Counseling Tools was birthed to provide people all over the world access to help on managing their relationship. The second thing that helped me create the organization is couples would come in and say, Chris, the therapy is great, but if I don't have any tools to apply ongoing after the therapy, then what good is it? So I wanted to create workshops, interventions, techniques, online courses, books, workbooks, because the same way you have a toolkit to conduct work, whether it be a household project at home, you need to have the same tools to conduct that work with your relationship. So that's really how I came about the opportunity to give access to people all over the world that want to work on that relationship.
So let's get into, okay, so I introduced you at the beginning of the segment here on Amazon Live, as well as joining us on other platforms as a relationship expert, as well as an author. What is it? We talked about it before, but for those who are just kind of catching up as we are wrapping up the series, we're going to let them know, Chris, how they can go back and watch the entire series. But what led you to want to become a therapist yourself?
The first thing is my life experience. I met my wife young. We were an undergrad 16 years ago, and we got pregnant unexpectedly with a child. And that led me to go to my own university's counseling center. And the first thing I noticed is that there were no men there. There were no men or women of color in my university counseling center. So the research shows the number one thing you want to look for in counseling when you seek out a therapist is that alliance. The alliance is the relationship. It's a lot easier to have a relationship with someone that can relate to you. So I wanted to provide opportunities for people that wanted a therapist that looks like them, that might have had same experiences, gender, culture, etc. And I've been blessed and privileged to have an opportunity to service people who may come in and say, Chris, I wouldn't have gone to counseling if it wasn't someone that might have been comfortable like you in terms of just being yourself. So I wanted to provide that same thing I was seeking that wasn't available to me when I sought counseling to others.
And so that leads us then to the why for our audience. And Chris, I want to read something from your book, Finding Your Relationship Fix. But I see more people are coming in there on the different platforms. I want to kind of reset real quick. For those who are just coming in, this is Cyrus Webb Presents on the Amazon Live platform, but we also are simulcasting on other online sites as well. Our guest is relationship expert and author Chris A. Matthews. Chris is the author of this book, Finding Your Relationship Fix. Chris and I have had a great time in our series talking about this book, but also Chris has workbooks as well. In fact, on Amazon, there are 4 of them. I want to quickly run down them. The first one you guys will see, I'm going to highlight it in the carousel for those joining us on the Amazon Live side, are Maintaining Safety, How to Guarantee Your Partner Feels Secure. Want you guys to see that one. Then the next one you guys will see there in the carousel, I'm going to highlight it. That one's on sale right now for $12.94. That's Expressing Care, How to Guarantee Your Partner Feels Loved. You see it there. The next one I'm going to highlight on the Amazon Live side is Making Their Voice Count, probably my favorite one, How to Guarantee Your Partner Feels Heard. You know, here we're all about the conversation, so that one really gets into that. And then the next one, the final one in the workbooks that are on the Amazon Live side, are Finding Acceptance, How to Guarantee Your Partner Feels Understood. You guys see there. But I want to read something, Chris, going back, though, to the paperback of Finding a Relationship Fix. Because for those who are thinking, you know what? Okay, Chris shared his story on why he became a therapist, counselor. How do I know this is something that'll work for me? This is what you actually wrote in the book. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the book again on the Amazon Live side. In the heading, Why Therapy Helps. This is what you said. For those who have the print edition of the book, it's on page 96. Chris writes, our perceptions can become our realities over time if we are not exposed to different influential factors designed to reconfigure insight and awareness. The same way our bodies become what we put into them, our minds create the pictures from the information we expose them to. Couples therapy helps by exposing each partner to different ways of thinking so they can produce a clearer picture for how they fit into each other's lives together. Assumptions are treated at their origins, which define the way each partner chooses to process or think about themselves, each other, and the intimate relationship as a whole. And then talking about your own role, Chris, you say this: therapists explore each partner's family of origin and other factors that generate the production of their assumptions. This process is designed to better help couples expose their blind spots or faulty thinking, which have the potential to create distorted assumptions. Assumptions is a big key in what you talk about here, which kind of leads us to what we were saying in the second thing about sometimes about the mind reading, Chris. But the role of the therapist then is important because it is helping them to see the real of it, right? So talk to us about that. What has that been like for you? Because not only are you having these virtual or online opportunities, you've been able to actually sit down with couples. What has that been like for you to help them to figure out those blind spots and how to best deal with them?
Yeah, so I treat on average roughly 10 to 15 couples a week in my private practice. And one of the things that I find every time I sit down with a couple is they'll use this phrase, they'll say, in my mind. And I always pause and allow them to acknowledge when they use that phrase, in my mind, their partner is not present. Their partner doesn't live in their mind. And we usually will pull an assumption based on worst case scenario a lot of the time. Or it'll come from what we desire or what we think. Just today in the session, a gentleman, he said, well, I thought you would have responded this way if I did it that way. And we usually will hear the golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated. Just because you've treated a person the way you want to be treated, it doesn't always mean it's going to be reciprocated. So at times, we'll assume if I do A, you'll do B, but making sure that in therapy, you have an individual like myself who's a non-biased party. I don't have the benefit of knowing the storyline prior to you coming into the office, so I can provide an opportunity for additional insight. So when I talk about those blind spots, the therapist is coming in with a higher level of curiosity because they're not into the day-to-day. It's almost similar, Cyrus, to how if you see a kid and then a couple years later, you see that kid and they look totally different, and the mother or the father isn't there every day to see the growth. So I can come into a session with a couple and pinpoint things that are not present because I'm not living every day with that partner.
Yeah, love that. I love that example too. So, Chris, I want to talk about, I'm not real big on stereotypes, but I do. One of the stereotypes for us as men is that we do not communicate very well, one, or we don't communicate at all. So I have to ask you, since you've been doing this work, do you find that to be true even in your counseling, that men are not, even though you talked about your own experience and now that they have another guy they can talk to, do you find that men are hesitant to talk about things?
So a lot of couples will come to me because I am a male therapist. Usually it's the wife or the female partner who makes the appointment, and they're seeking out a man because they want to have their partner who's a male comfortable. And what I find is that men communicate different. It's not that we don't communicate, it's different. More often than not, it's on an analytical level. So men may not communicate using filling words. We're more so about what's the problem? How do I fix the problem? I want to be validated and awarded for fixing the problem. So a lot of times female partners, once again, not to say this is for every female or for every male,
Right.
but in my work, I usually find the female partner doesn't necessarily want the answer. They're seeking connection. They're seeking the process of feeling with the person. So if men are so analytical, so into their heads, then there's not really room to be into your heart if you're so into your head. So a lot of the work I do is really helping men see it similar to how when you look at music sheets, you have the two lines, you have the analytics, and you have the emotion. Let's meet in the middle. In other words, I'm not trying to change a man or change a female. It's a matter of translation. Being
Yeah.
able to understand that if you have a need you're seeking, how do you communicate to your partner so they can receive it? That's really the goal.
Yeah. And I think that's it, especially because, and it goes to something else. I think that unfortunately, Chris, I think the world we live in has in many ways trivialized, I think is the right word, relationships, because we read about these celebrities who are married for a week
Mm-hmm.
and they break up, and then there's drama, and so it almost becomes entertainment. So I bring that up to say, it's part of your hope, even in conversations like this, that whether our audience is watching, they're already have committed to a partner or looking for a partner, they realize the seriousness of that relationship and that partnership.
So we are in a microwavable time where everything's instant, and relationships aren't necessarily going to always be given to you the way you desire at the beginning. So that social media, the TV, the celebrities breaking up with one person one week with another person the next week, a lot of that does play into people because we have a sense of entitlement. We
Hmm.
all believe in a relationship. I deserve to feel good all the time. And that's not
Yeah.
necessarily realistic. I'm reading Will Smith's autobiography, and he talks about
Mm.
book how there's this false perception that when you initiate a marriage, it's going to always be great. And I think
Yeah.
some of that stems from childhood. What's the number one type of movies the kids watch? Disney movies. The Disney movie always has a happy ending. Well, Cinderella and the Prince, you don't get to see what happens after the wedding. I
Yeah.
get to see what happens after the wedding and the honeymoon's over. And what
Yeah.
that looks like is the ebbs and flows. The same way I like to think of the stock market. I'm not looking at every day up and down. I'm looking at the progression. So if you approach your marriage or your relationship thinking about the progressive impacts, at that point, you've now changed your mindset to handle the day ins and day outs.
Yeah, such a great point. And I think it is one of those things, Chris, as we're kind of having these conversations, one of the things that the feedback I've gotten from the replays is how much people appreciate someone talking about these things. I think that's, again, it goes to the communication piece. These are things that are not talked about because, like so many other things in life, people sometimes get embarrassed about talking about, okay, everything's not perfect because they're looking at what people portray on social media. They're looking at what someone looks like on television. They're like, okay, I don't have that. One of my colleagues, well, someone, I wouldn't say we are friends, but we associate, is Hoda Kotb. Well, this year she announced her and her partner separating. And her being in the public, that was a difficult thing. Of course, we who kind of knew her knew, and then those, of course, in her circle knew, but to publicly come on television and say, we decided to go our separate ways, she said she felt embarrassed. And I thought about that. So that's interesting that she feels embarrassed to have to tell people. But I understood then it was because then people didn't think she had this perfect thing. So do you find what I have found in having these conversations with you, Chris, and reading your work is that it's not about being perfect. It's about being able to complement each other. Do you think most people realize that difference? That they're not going to have everything is not going to be perfect, right? But they can get to a place where they can coexist, grow together, and be able to support each other.
You just nailed it. You said grow together. If we think about life, I do in my sessions a timeline intervention where I'll ask a partner to give me the longest living family member. Usually it's in the 80s. So let's go with 80, right? And let's say a partner or couple, they're in their 30s. Let's say they're 30. Then I'll ask the couple, okay, So you basically are saying you have 50 years together. How do you want to spend that 50 years? From 30 to 80, does that look like making each other better? Does it look like having a companion to do day-to-day activities with to make your life easier? Does it look like having a travel partner? Does it look like having someone you can pull all your resources and share? So at the end of the day, the relationship in itself is a tool. Marriage is a tool. And that comes from a book. It's written by, I forgot the author's name, but the book is called If You're in My Office, It's Already Too Late. And it was a prominent divorce attorney who wrote the book. And that's the statement he says in the book. He says, marriages are a tool which are designed to produce something. And I believe that tool is to produce something greater than what you had by yourself. So if you find that relationship is no longer producing more than what you would have had by yourself, then at that point, it's not that you're leaving the relationship already died.
Yeah. That what you were just talking just now reminded me of something that I read in this workbook, Expressing Care, Chris, how to guarantee your partner feels loved. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that in the carousel, because when you were talking just now, I'm like, wait a minute, I remember reading something. And so this one is $12.94, guys. But this is what you wrote. And again, this is on page 45, Chris, under moving past regret. I love this because it ties into what you just said. You write, we have all made choices or said things we wish we could take back. Due to our inability to travel backwards in time and erase past actions, we are forced to live with regret. Regret occurs when you revisit historical moments in your life and develop feelings of shame and guilt based on things you did or said that cannot be changed. Shame and guilt shape how you see yourself, which ultimately impacts how your intimate partner sees you. If you believe yourselves to be an embarrassment or disgrace, then your actions can become a self-fulfilling prophecy and bring these beliefs to reality. Your regrets produce a thought cycle fueled by feelings of shame and guilt, which cause poor decisions to be made. If you regret hurting a past intimate partner but fail to learn how your actions impact others, you will repeat the same actions, confirming you are a person who hurts those they care about. That is a powerful thing to think about. And as you're talking about, when you were mentioning that about if they're in the office, it's too late. I think a lot of times, and you and I've talked about here on this program, when people should actually seek someone like you out. I'm going to ask you that question again, but I want to talk about that because for some people, you do see them even talk about it online. I see them make the same mistakes. I see them choose the same type of a person, right? Or I seem to always end up in this situation. Talk about the importance of, if someone is saying that or feeling that, why it's important for them to see what they may have unresolved there.
So it's a process. And I think that relationships need to be looked at from the lens of constantly changing. If you've made decisions at the beginning of the relationship and then you've grown through that relationship, there has to be a shedding process. And a lot of what I talk about in that workbook regarding regret, if you think about just myself, for example, I'll be vulnerable to use myself as an example. I met my wife when I was 19 years old, and we got pregnant at 20. If I fast forward all these years later, I'm a completely different person than what I was at 19. We got to actually grow up together. And there are parts of ourselves that we had to shed. It wasn't forget and forgive. It was more of understanding how we grew and learned from that issue or that stage of our life. And when you completely shed that part, that's no longer who you are. That's no longer a part of you. So the regret and shame doesn't get shed, it gets retained. So I don't get held accountable for decisions, things I said or did when I was a kid. My wife and I have gone through. Most people don't go through. We try to go around or over. Therapy helps you go through the issue. Because when you go through something, you've actually taken other things on the other side of it.
And I think that, again, is why these conversations are so important. And so it goes back to what I mentioned with the question. You and I have discussed this before, but for those who may just be coming in and catching the end of this series, I do want to say, if you're joining us on Amazon Live, feel free to go back. You can catch all of this series that I've done with Chris there. If you're joining us on the other social media sites, including on YouTube, we have a playlist there on YouTube with the series there. But also on our social media, you'll find all of it there too. We also did a similar series on IG. You can find it there also in our IG Live. So, Chris, if the question is then, for those who have heard us, and this has been so valuable, and I think so important for us to have this type of information out there for people, let them know, one, what's available, but also two, that it's not too late. If they have not given up, it's not too late. So I'm going to ask you who should see, but I want to talk about when first. When should someone, and we've discussed this, but let our audience know again, when should they think about seeing a therapist or a counselor?
So there are different stages. The first stage is if you're a dating partner and you've either had a relationship that went south, this is a second marriage or an opportunity. As soon as you believe you're getting serious with that person, serious might look like moving in. It might look like engaging in sexual activity with that person. It looks like a pregnancy, any type of event that is going to connect you to that person a little bit further than where you are at the beginning stages. That's when you want to start doing the therapy. The second phase would be at the initial moment that you've been hurt or you can't get past an event or issue. If you find that you and your partner are stuck, go see a therapist as well. The third phase would be for maintenance. It might be, okay, our children are leaving the home, everything's fine now, but this is a transitional moment in our life and we want to be able to prepare for it. Or one partner got diagnosed with a health disorder. I want to get prepared for this journey. I believe Les Brown said you're either going through something, about to go through something, or coming out of something. So any of those three phases would be a good time to go see a counselor. So my goal just now is to give you an opportunity to understand it's never not a good time to see a counselor. It's more about earlier than later. The therapist can do more good earlier than later.
You know, so what you just said reminds me of something else. Then we will remind them how they can stay connected with you, because it's kind of like us. For those, hopefully our audience are getting their regular checkups, right? And the checkup doesn't mean anything is wrong, but you still know that you're supposed to go in annually to make sure everything is good. Right. Do you think that's also part of what happens? And I literally just had this epiphany as you were just saying that, Chris, is that people equate therapy or a counselor with something being wrong. Right. Do you think part of that has to be a mindset shift as how they look at a therapist or a counselor?
I definitely believe it's becoming a mindset shift, because premarital counseling, or, you know, when you think about opportunities to get coaching, a lot of times that's a safe space. Mm-hmm. So the biggest piece is people believe that a therapist is someone that's going to judge you. And I'm going to give you an example. So my wife and I, we also do substance abuse counseling through another business. And that business predominantly treats individuals who've been cited for a DWI. Most of the people, 8 out of 10 clients that we see that are mandated for services because of DWI, they're not alcoholics. They might have had a drink at dinner or a couple glasses of wine and then drove home. But when you tell someone you got a DWI, they automatically think you're an alcoholic. The same as counseling. If you tell someone I'm going to therapy, they think, oh, well, you must really have a problem that had to bring another person into it. And a lot of that comes through grade school, right? In school, or not even school, think about your job. When you work a job, there's this kind of hidden belief that you don't go to the manager unless you really can't solve it yourself. And I'm trying to get rid of that whole culture in general. Magic Johnson said that he would prefer his employees to bring a small problem to him before it becomes a big problem. And I believe that needs to be the same in a marriage. And the same seeking out counseling or any relationship. Take a small problem to a therapist before it becomes a big problem later.
Such a great point and such a great conversation, Chris. Man, this is, again, for someone who does not want a relationship. I love these tools, man. These are some good stuff, man. And it's good even in my line of work in the way I'm talking with the guest. I'm engaging with the guest, building an atmosphere of trust with the guest so that they can be able to come on. I mean, there's so many things, and of course, this is the way my mind works. My mind, I'm always, when I read something or have a conversation, I try to see how I can personally connect with it, because that makes it easier for me then to be able to talk about it. And I can honestly say, in reading these books, it reminds me, one, why singleness is the right step for me, but also how, if our audience is out there that think about a relationship, they're in a relationship, having, whether they're having issues or not, the benefits of being able to take advantage of services like what you're able to offer, Chris, and talking about it, knowing it's okay. They're not by themselves, and that there are, if they want to be able to get to a place where they can continue to grow together, it really becomes almost a necessity for them. Again, everyone, relationship expert and author Chris A. Matthews has been our guest for this series. Again, the main book we've been talking about is this one, Finding Your Relationship Fix. You guys can see it there. Have it highlighted on the Amazon Live site there. It's $19.99. You can get this in print, but it also has the Kindle edition of 6 tips for for finding your relationship. Right, Chris, is the title of that one, of the Kindle edition. The workbooks are there too on the Amazon Live side. The Kindle edition of Finding Your Relationship Fix is $9.99. So if you guys want to go ahead and get it today, you can go ahead and just one-click it there on Amazon for the Kindle edition. And Chris, let them know, how can they stay connected with you and the work that you're doing?
So our website, relationshipcounselingtools.com. That's also my IG handle, relationshipcounselingtools.com. You can also send me messages or reach out on my personal website, chrisamatthews.com. A lot of churches, a lot of organizations seeking speakers for relationships, they can send requests through chrisamatthews.com as well. And Cyrus, before we go, I gotta say this. I know throughout this series you've mentioned that it's led you to want to respect single life, and I want to applaud that, because relationships do take work. They take time. They take care. It's almost like someone that has a pet. If you don't want to take care of a dog or animal, don't be a dog owner. So if you don't want to take care of a relationship, don't engage in it. So I respect what you're saying, because I want to make sure it's posed the appropriate way. It's not that you're anti-relationships. You just don't want to take on that responsibility that comes with the relationship right now.
Chris, and to that point, I want to say something on a personal note for our audience too. I was having a conversation with my mom this week, and she was talking about me having, because I used to have pets, but because of my pre-COVID, because of travel, I was gone normally 15 days out of the month. So my pets got, I went on a trip one time. My mom went to let my pet out, and they didn't come back. So I felt so bad. But then I thought, okay, I get it. It's my fault. And so that's why I can be honest about that and say, I can recognize I love pets. I do, but I don't, the commitment part is hard, because I also want to do this other thing, and I'm not willing to stop doing this because I have a pet at home. And I'm not trying to trivialize a relationship, but I also realize for myself, a relationship is not a priority for me at this time. So I'm not going to put into it the time that I put into my work and other things. So I think that's something I've been very good about, Chris, in being honest about that first with myself.
And that's being responsible. You're being responsible, right? Like, so I don't want to trivialize a pet as a relationship, but if you're not willing to cherish and nourish that relationship, then you'd be an irresponsible relationship partner. And there are a lot of people out there. There are a lot of people out there that are okay with hookups, okay with just going and dating, okay with nothing that's serious. You don't have to go into a serious relationship. You can just play the field. Like, there are people who do that. I actually counseled a gentleman in one-on-one counseling. He was a travel nurse, and he said, Chris, I'm in a new city every 20-something days or every 15 days. He said, it just doesn't make sense for my career right now to have a relationship. So if you're in a career or in a stage of life that doesn't allow you the opportunity to give it the attention it needs, don't break a heart. Just go ahead and continue to do you.
Yeah, I do want to say I'm not having hookups though. I know you were saying I was, but I
Yeah.
just look. Some of my folks have asked me. I'm like, no, I'm really just there for work. I really am. I go. I'm there for 3 days. Back, but no, I get the point you're making, Chris. But I wanted to mess with you about that.
I
But
got
I mean,
you.
again, I think that's what I love about this series. Though, honestly, is that it really is about, as you talk about in the book, knowing yourself, because you're the only person you can know. You're not in the other person's head. Like you were giving the example, someone's not in your head, right? You're
And
not in
that's
their
important.
head.
This
Yeah.
thing, what makes me a unicorn, right? And I say a unicorn in the sense that there weren't a lot of 20-year-old men that sought out marriage at 20 years old.
Mm,
None of my friends were seeking out marriage. The reason why my wife and I worked so young, we wanted the same thing. I talk
mm,
about how in my book and a lot of the different shows I'm on, I sought out my wife intentionally through a dating app. Like I was dating for marriage at 20. I didn't want
well,
to play the field. I didn't want to, go to clubs and hang out. I wanted a wife and she wanted a husband. We wanted that
mm,
commitment real young. And you don't find that too often.
right.
So, 16 years later, we're able to say we're working out because we knew from the foundation this is what we wanted.
Mm. Wow. It's a powerful thing. Chris, keep up the great work. Thank you so much for being on with us for this series. I really appreciate it. Again, everyone, relationship expert and author Chris A. Matthews has been our guest. You can find all of his books down below in the carousel on the Amazon Live side. And Chris, looking forward to having you back on the program again, man.
I look forward to it. Cyrus has been
Yeah.
great.
Thank you, man. I appreciate this too. Also, want to give a big shout out to Double Exposure Media Relations for setting this series up for us for Cyrus Webb Presents on Amazon Live. And also appreciate all of you for tuning in, both those joining us live as well as the replay. Today's show is being powered by ByteCool. You guys probably have seen the laptop here. This is their Windows 10 Pro edition of ByteCool's laptop. If you guys are looking for a great laptop that's great for projects like this, for streaming, maybe you're doing Zoom, working at home, doing hybrid, that kind of thing. You're looking for a laptop that's good for that, even for gaming. I don't use it for gaming. I use it just for streaming for myself. But ByteCool definitely has a great laptop that's great for that. That's what I've been using here for the past year. It's on sale right now for $259. It's $259. A great deal, again, for a laptop that is easy to travel with. As I'm now back on the road, it's easy to be able to fold up, put in your bag, have it ready when you need it. Keep in mind a couple of things, though, with this particular laptop. I have not mentioned it this month, but I do want to let you guys know. It does have, of course, your ports on it. It does not come with an Ethernet port, so you will need an adapter. I do have it hardwired in, but I'm using an Ethernet adapter to do that. This particular laptop does not come with its own Ethernet port that is built into it. So just keep that in mind. I mentioned it is the Windows 10 Pro. However, it does give you a free upgrade to Windows 11. I took advantage of that for myself. So again, today's show is being powered by ByteCool, their Windows 10 Pro laptop on sale right now for $259. Also, if you guys did miss any of my conversation with Chris, you all can be able to catch the replay here on Amazon Live, as well as the other shows in this series as well. I really have enjoyed having these conversations with Chris. Hope you guys will go back and be able to enjoy those. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying thank you all so much for watching us here at Cyrus Webb Presents. We'll talk to you again real soon. Take care.